Someone, somewhere, put the unspeakable into writing, as if it were just a simple working option. How many other lines of that kind are still sleeping behind neutral administrative stamps? Mark Harris, a civilian analyst at the Pentagon, turns a yellowed page, reads a line, and understands that American civilian planes were supposed to explode, officially shot down by Cuba. Mark Harris is not supposed to read this. His job is the technical sorting of old military files, not the secrets that can derail a democracy. Yet the file is there, badly filed, sitting crooked, the tab almost torn off. On the cover, a bland bureaucratic note. Inside, chilling sentences. American cities, Cuban refugees, civilian planes, and a single objective: obtain a pretext. The feeling that he has opened a drawer that wasn't meant for him won't leave him. What hooks Mark isn't the violence of the ideas. In these archives, he has already seen plans for total war. The anomaly is the target, not the enemy, their own people. In the middle of a paragraph, a date jumps out at him. March 13th, 1962. A memorandum coldly titled, Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba, TS. In the margin, a name underlined mechanically, that of the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. Mark stops at one sentence. Make it appear to public opinion that U.S. civilian airliners have been destroyed by hostile Cuban actions. The text is not talking about a surprise attack. It is talking about staging. A soft hum from the air conditioning fills the room, without masking the weight of the phrase. Mark tells himself it might be a paperwork misunderstanding, a draft among others, produced by an overzealous officer, never leaving his office. The U.S. administration has already generated mountains of absurd documents, filed and then forgotten without consequence. In his mind, he sees a tired colonel, surrounded by maps of Cuba, forced to propose creative ideas to a hierarchy obsessed with Castro. He imagines a closed meeting where someone would have blurted out, "We have to consider every scenario, even the worst ones, so we can rule them out afterward." The memorandum he has in his hands could be the product of that pressure, a kind of twisted intellectual exercise that no decision-maker would truly take seriously. Then Mark rereads the first page and sees the signature of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff above an official transmission stamp. That hypothesis dies instantly. A brief silence settles. Mark then takes a step back. Maybe the document is indeed real, properly signed, duly transmitted, but belongs to a global theater where written words and intentions play a different game. He tells himself these scenarios may have been used as a political lever. A military chief, convinced that Castro must be overthrown, pushes deliberately extreme proposals, not expecting them to be adopted as is. The goal would not be their execution, but the creation of a shock, to force the White House to accept less radical options that are still more aggressive than the status quo. Within that logic, Northwoods would be an instrument of internal negotiation, not a true operational plan. A calculated escalation, used as bargaining chips. Mark then stumbles on the scenarios of civilian planes replaced by drones, with exact registrations, detailed routes, and sequences scheduled down to the minute. This is no longer bargaining language. It is mission language. Another idea imposes itself, shorter, more brutal. What if Northwoods was neither an isolated madness nor a simple pressure tool, but the ordinary reflection of a planning culture in which the morally acceptable boundary has shifted, slowly, without warning, under the cover of the Cold War? What if those who drafted this document did not see themselves as extremists, but simply as professionals? Mark then understands that his question is no longer, who thought this up, but how many were ready to see it as normal? The text does not try to shock its reader. It does not justify its own radical nature. It lists, coolly, potential incidents, as if it were talking about routine naval maneuvers. What he thought was an isolated transgression suddenly looks like an exposed fragment of an entire system. To verify this, Mark goes back to the context. The first pages of the file talk about Cuba, nationalizations, refineries, sugar, American companies that were expropriated. You can read of tensions, economic measures, lifted quotas, blocked cargo ships. In a few years, an economic ally has become a Soviet outpost less than 200 kilometers from the American coast. In this setting, the Bay of Pigs looms in the background, like an unhealed wound. A botched operation, exiles captured, a humiliated president, a criticized army, an intelligence apparatus publicly called into question. And behind all this, an obsession. Overthrow Castro, but without triggering a direct war with Moscow. Northwoods is born precisely in this in-between. For Mark, the wall is not made of cardboard. It is set in the text itself, between two administrative paragraphs, where the tone changes almost imperceptibly. Before, the memorandum talks about constraints, international law, the UN Charter, American public opinion to be handled with care, allies to reassure, the need for an acceptable casus belli, one that can be read in the newspapers, defended at the UN podium. After, it no longer talks about constraints. It talks about fabrication. The blockage is clear. Without a visible aggression, without a ship sunk, without a plane shot down, there is no solid political basis for military intervention in Cuba. The intelligence services can quietly sabotage, influence the economy, try to diplomatically isolate the regime, but none of that provides a simple, exploitable image that can be sold to the population. This lack of a narrative becomes a strategic dead end. Mark sees it in the reports attached to the file. Around the table in Washington, the same names keep appearing. Civilian officials, military officers, intelligence men, all stuck in the same equation. They want Castro's fall. They want to avoid another Bay of Pigs. They want to stay within a minimal legal framework, or at least one that can be defended. So someone, somewhere along this chain, crosses a line. Instead of waiting for an incident, they propose to create one. Not symbolically, materially. In the memorandum, everything is structured to make this solution workable. The Joint Chiefs of Staff do not settle for a vague idea. The authors imagine explosions at Guantanamo, fires set on an American base, munitions that go off, carefully calibrated damage, evidence planted on the spot to point to Cuba. Further on, the aviation scenarios chill Mark. A real commercial flight with registered passengers takes off. On paper, it follows its route. In the plan, it is quietly replaced by an unmanned aircraft, a drone, which explodes offshore, while an identical, empty plane lands discreetly elsewhere, far from the cameras. Officially, the world would see a Cuban hijacking ending in the Atlantic. Off the record, there are no American victims, just an industrial-scale lie. The political wall is here. For these planners, the problem is not killing American civilians. It is being able to produce a credible image of an attack without completely losing control of the escalation. Mark cannot take his eyes off a concrete detail. On a photocopied page, a pen has scratched the margin, as if someone, at the moment of reading, had pressed too hard. The paper is slightly pierced, the line driven in, broken in the middle of a word. A tiny gesture, frozen decades earlier, like a tension that no official report will ever mention. Mark feels this hole physically, because he knows that, to cross the line, it is not enough to write abstract sentences. At some point, you have to mentally accept the scene itself. He pictures an airport terminal, families saying goodbye, rolling suitcases, tickets being stamped. Even if, in the plan, the passengers actually survive, hidden elsewhere, anonymized, the public announcement of their deaths remains the tool. Their names, their faces, are used to trigger the necessary outrage. This wall is the point where strategic fiction becomes a scenario that requires people, places, schedules. The memorandum also mentions possible explosions in American cities, acts of sabotage against Cuban refugees, orchestrated by the United States, attributed to Castro in order to turn public opinion. Here again, everything is thought out in terms of incidents, media impact, preparation of press releases. Mark understands that only one thing truly blocks this plan: the political decision to say yes. The military apparatus has already projected itself to the other side of the wall by proposing these actions. It is no longer a taboo. It is an option on the table. And the question that haunts him as he reads is no longer, how could they write this? But what exactly stopped them from doing it? The historians Mark later consults agree on one point. Northwoods remained a plan that was proposed, transmitted, then abandoned, with no sign of implementation. Where they differ is in how deep they believe it goes. Some see it as an extreme anomaly of a tense period. Others as a revealing symptom of the Cold War logic, where the boundary between national protection and manipulation of public opinion becomes porous. What they carefully avoid facing, Mark senses, is the fear that this kind of document is not unique, but simply one of the few that survived, found decades later thanks to a law passed for a completely different reason. For Mark, the turning point does not come from a spectacular revelation, but from a discrete sequence. He first discovers, in the file, the way Northwoods fits into a larger whole, called Operation Mongoose. A secret campaign against Cuba, made up of sabotage, economic pressure, clandestine actions coordinated by a small group at the top of the executive branch. This plan is not an isolated comment. It is a piece of a puzzle already in motion. The memorandum of March 13, 1962 comes late, after the Bay of Pigs, before the missile crisis. At a moment when Washington is looking for a path between humiliating inaction and direct confrontation with the USSR. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, led by Lyman Lemnitzer, then propose a shortcut. If reality does not provide the necessary provocation, it is possible to manufacture it. What Mark believed to be true, until then, fit into a simple and comfortable line. Moral limits are built into the heart of institutions, even in times of crisis. Northwoods shatters this certainty. The limit has not disappeared, but it has clearly been shifted, discussed, explored in writing. Not in a marginal fantasy, but in an official, signed document intended for the Secretary of Defense. It is not a note from an isolated individual. It is the product of a collegial body designed to represent the entire military command. As he continues reading, Mark also sees what held the plan back. Nowhere does he find an execution order. No operational follow-up. No mission code launched from these proposals. Archival work, analyses by the National Security Archive, and reports from the Assassination Records Review Board converge. The plan was transmitted, then set aside. This refusal haunts him as much as the proposal, because it reveals something else, just as brutal. There is no automatic barrier built into the machine. What blocked Northwoods was not an infallible safety mechanism, but a specific context, specific personalities, internal tensions, a deteriorated relationship between a president and some of his generals. Kennedy does not renew Lemnitzer as head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The general then leaves for a command post at NATO. Historians remain cautious. They see deep disagreements, a climate of mistrust, without being able to attribute a unique role to Northwoods. For Mark, this vagueness has a paradoxical effect. The non-execution of the plan does not completely reassure him. Above all, it shows that, under another alignment of circumstances, the outcome could have been different. The same ideas, in other political hands, could have crossed the line. What remains is what he discovers in place of his former belief. He understands that the state, in situations of existential confrontation, sometimes reasons with a toolkit broader than the one the public imagines. In this kit, we find psychological operations, scenarios of fabricated incidents, plans where the world's perception of an event matters as much as, if not more than, the event itself. Northwoods is not a myth. It is not either the key to all the conspiracy theories that have circulated since. The document, as it exists in the archives, does not prove that these methods were applied elsewhere, nor that an American government actually sacrificed civilians to launch a war. But it proves something else, more uncomfortable. American military officials formally put in writing the possibility of using their own citizens as emotional levers, if necessary by simulating their death, to justify an intervention. For Mark, the question stops being, did the Pentagon sacrifice civilians to blame Cuba? It becomes, how many scenarios of this kind remain in files that will never be opened? When he closes the binder, he has not uncovered a hidden conspiracy that changed the course of history. He has gotten his hands on the clear trace of a possible that did not happen, but could have. And that possibility alone permanently cracks his automatic trust in the official narrative of crises. He now knows that, behind every sober communiqué, every justification for intervention, Another layer of documents may exist, where people discuss not only what happened, but what they could have made people believe had happened. As he leaves the reading room, a single question turns over in his mind, dry, unanswered. If this plan was written, proposed, signed, then which one, more discreet, was never declassified? In the cold light of the neon tubes, Mark puts the memorandum back in its gray box. His fingers rest for a moment on the edge of the paper, where the pen, years earlier, pierced the fiber. In the distance, an archive cart squeaks, rolling slowly between the metal shelves. The corridor seems endless, thousands of identical boxes lined up to the ceiling. On one of them, the label is half peeled off, the title erased by time.